Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to the Rattlecast. It is Tuesday, April 28th. This is episode number 38, featuring William Trowbridge. Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995, and we just do this because we love poetry. So if you love poetry as much as we do, please do click the like button and share and tell your friends and all that good stuff. No matter where you're watching this, if you're watching it on iTunes, well, I guess you'd be listening on iTunes. If you're watching it on YouTube, if you're watching it on Facebook, whatever you're doing, just do me a favor and click the like button or some kind of emotion to show the algorithms that you care, because that'll show us that you care. Now, one little thing before we start, I want to let everybody know we have the prompt poem coming up. The prompt was The Swimmer at the end of this broadcast. We're doing it a little differently, though. I mentioned this last week, but we are not going to be doing pre-recorded poems anymore. So if you would like to read your poem that you wrote for the prompt this week for The Swimmer, you have to call me in, or if you email your poem to openmic@rattle.com, include your phone number if you want me to call you, and I can call you up over the phone. Or you can send me a chat message right now over on Skype to Rattle Poetry, all one word. And if you do neither, but you'd still sent me one of your prompt poems, I'm going to read a few. I can't get to everybody. We received about a dozen this week. We can always do a few as a way to cap off every episode. So go ahead and let me know if you want to read it live over the air. I like these shows to be as spontaneous as possible. And it's sort of more fun for me that way. And there's less prep for me that way if we just kind of see what happens. So that's what we're going to do. I'm just going to flip over to that openmic@rattle.com email account and see what you've all sent me. And we'll read and share a few of them at the end of the show. So do that. Now, for the warm-up poem today, I thought we'd do, William Trowbridge is one of the most entertaining poets. These two books are just a delight to read, and they make you feel good in a very specific way. And today's poem that I thought I'd read is just today's poem on Rattle, which is Quarantine Day 35 by Jamie R. Wood, and it's just so different in tone to what William Trowbridge does. I thought that'd be a good contrast to do as everybody comes in and joins the Rattlecast here. So let's flip over to the poem, and this is Quarantine Day 35 by Jamie R. Wood, and hopefully you can hear this. Here we go.
Quarantine Day 35. The online coronavirus survey asks if you've experienced hair loss. And you laugh because just yesterday you took brand new clippers to your scalp and sheared off enough hair to help someone with cancer feel human again. Your friend tells you over Zoom happy hour to hug yourself to trick your body into feeling less lonely. So you wrap your arms, right to left and left to right, across your chest until your hands reach your shoulder blades, and you can feel your heart beating inside you, as if it belongs to someone else. But you know that hasn't been true for a long time. You stay up all night watching hospital dramas, because you want to know who will live and who will die. And one morning, you wake to find out via email that one of your students died in her sleep. All day you tell people again and again, she had kids, plural. But it turns out she only had one 5-year-old daughter, singular. But what does it matter? Every child is a universe. And one morning, one small girl in Portland, Oregon, woke up without her one very important mother. Sometimes my hands shake with all they cannot hold, and I don't know how to measure what it means for time to pass. Which simile will do? Like a heartbeat? Like a million fine hairs falling from a head? Like a mother who slept through the night and then stopped, her universe carrying the weight of her through all the days of her life?
That was Jamie R. Wood reading her poem Quarantine Day 35. She writes, the ongoing event that we're all experiencing right now is social isolation in an attempt to protect ourselves from our loved ones from COVID-19. And some people like me live alone, and so the isolation is profound. Last week I learned that one of my students died in her sleep. And of all the things I knew about her, the thing I kept thinking about was the fact that she was a single mother and that her kids were young. I knew that, but I couldn't remember how many kids she had until someone told me that she only had one. And at that point, it didn't really matter to me. The loss is great, no matter how you calculate it. The loss of this one woman and my feelings about it can be multiplied many times over and applied to each of us. We wake up and fall asleep to loss, and there aren't adequate words to measure it all. So that was Jamie R. Wood's poem of the day on Rattle.com. Made me tear up. I don't know about you. The first time I read it, and this morning too, the first time I listened to her read it. And she did a great job reading it too, I should mention. We talked in the last episode with George Bilgier about letting silence speak when you're reading poems, and she did a great job of that there. That's something I really wish I could do a better job of myself. But a beautiful, touching poem and a tribute to not just one life lost, but so many of the lives lost lately. Now, switching gears though, today's poet is William Trowbridge, and let me show you his book here. His most recent book is Oldguy Superhero, the complete collection, and it has these amazing illustrations by Tim Mayer. So it's sort of a hybrid between a graphic novel and a book of poetry. It's an interesting collection from Hen Press, and I'm going to read you Bill's bio really quick. A former Poet Laureate of Missouri, William Trowbridge is the author of 7 full-length collections and 5 chapbooks. His poems have appeared in more than 35 anthologies and textbooks, as well as in numerous publications, including the Writer's Almanac and American Life and Poetry. His awards include an Academy of American Poets Prize, a Pushcart Prize, etc., etc., so many awards. He lives in Kansas City area and teaches at the University of Nebraska low-residency MFA writing program. And here he is, William Trowbridge. Hey, William.
Hi, Tim.
How you doing?
All right. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. It's really looking forward to reading your poems today. I've loved your work for a long time.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I remember somebody told me to read Ship of Fool before I knew who you were, before we'd ever published you, and I loved that book. And then you started citing all of a sudden out of nowhere. So we published a few poems, and we published a bunch of these Oldguy superhero poems. Do you want to start out just by reading maybe one poem, maybe the first poem, to sort of let people know what the book's about?
Okay. I'll read the first poem in the book. Actually, Red Hen was generous enough to do a chapbook before this book came out in the form of a comic book. They actually went to a publisher who specialized in comic books, and it came out exactly looking like a comic book, including the Charles Atlas ad in the back page. Then it sort of morphed into this full collection. So this is the first poem, and it actually sort of came to me. I was seeing superheroes all over the place, flying and appearing and disappearing in fiction and film and video games and everything. And I noticed they're all young. So I thought I need to fill out the superhero universe with my guy, who's called Oldguy Superhero. So this is the first poem in the collection, and a kind of introduction to him. Oldguy Superhero feels like a young guy in a bad costume. The arms and legs sag, and the waist too tight. There should be a large S, golden star, or lightning bolt. There's what looks like a 0, and on his trunks depends. The boots look more like flannel slippers. Some lout's made off with his super hearing and x-ray vision, leaving only an amply ear and Coke bottle lenses. Like certain sheep, he doesn't fly so much as plummet. He hasn't smashed through a good wall or door since before he can remember, which is a little after breakfast. Speeding bullets and tall buildings must now be turtles and molehills. He has no fear of an erection lasting more than 4 hours, but he's depressed and often flatulent. His best tactic, the long wait, accounts for the demise of many a foe. that, or rambling on and on and on and on, which can paralyze from as far as 10 feet. He's not handsome like Clark Kent or rich like Bruce Wayne, but in the prolonged run, he can be a deadly opponent if he doesn't mix you up with someone else.
That was the title poem, or the first poem from Oldguy Superhero. William, you mentioned. First, I should say, if anybody has any questions for William Trowbridge, I'm watching the chat windows both on YouTube and on Facebook, and everything's all working well. So if you have any questions, just ask them there, and I will pass them on. But William, how do you? I was wondering. You're one of the more thematically oriented poets. You have the I'm familiar with three of your books: the Kong book, then Ship of Fool, and Oldguy, which all have these themes. How do you end up like with a theme? Like, did you write that poem as if it were like one poem, and then you said, "Oh, yes, I have more here," or do you like say, "Oh, I think I could write a whole series of poems like this"? Like, what came first, the chicken or the egg?
The chicken. I think I wrote one poem. I wrote the Oldguy poem with no intention of writing any more Oldguy poems. The same thing going back to the Kong book, which I guess the earliest series book I composed, and that too, there was one Kong poem I wrote, and then it triggered me on something else, and that triggered me on something else, and on and on and on. I try to follow these till the bitter end, without getting to the point where I'm repeating myself, and it's kind of worked for me. So I'm not fighting it. Something when the poem starts coming, you can't say no.
Yeah. And how many poems in do you realize you have like a whole book? Like, is it the kind of thing where you're just like, and you don't even notice you're writing more and more, and then you say, "Oh, I have a book," or do you end up writing toward a book eventually?
Well, when I get going, then I start writing toward a book. Mm-hmm. But I'm not really intent with like the first 3 or 4 poems of going much farther, unless the spirit leads me, and thank goodness it does sometimes. So by the time I get like what would be half a book, or in that case, like the Kong book and the Oldguy book were both chapbooks at first. And so the Kong chapbook was 15 years earlier than the actual Kong collection. He sort of stopped talking to me and then started again 15 years later, and then the whole full collection came out. And the Oldguy, as I said, was a chapbook to begin with too. But I by the time the chapbook was done, I was pretty well sure I was going to do lots more Oldguy poems.
And you mentioned, I like the phrase, you said, that the fool was talking to you, or Kong was talking to you. Do you feel like there's I don't know, like does it come from like a separate part of your brain, or like how does, like who's speaking to you? Like how does that work?
It does come from some mysterious place, which I always am happy to have happen. It's not a good idea to have all this stuff be conscious and planned and outlined and everything. I always tell my students, you have to let the poem start talking to you, instead of you doing it like a freshman essay or something like that. So yeah, it's some kind of channel opens up, and I'm I just go with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's really, it's just some books or poems are just you pick through, and there's like I like this poem, and then this poem didn't do anything for me, and then like 4 poems later you see one that's great. But when there's an arc and there's a story behind it, and there's a character that repeats, it's engaging in the way a novel's engaging, I feel like. Do you like to read books like this, or like what makes you want to write books like this?
You mean poetry books?
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the reasons that this happens is that I was a fiction scholar I was going to grow up to be a fiction scholar, and all of my graduate studies were toward a dissertation in fiction, not poetry. And in fact, my dissertation is on the novels of William Faulkner. So I was sort of narrative oriented when I got into poetry, and I got sort of sidelined when I was studying for my Ph.D. comps, and there was a scary oral exam at Vanderbilt, which was 2 hours long, and it was up or down, live or die. And I'd never had an oral exam before. All of my stuff had been written before, so I was very tense about that. And there was no reading list or anything. It was, everything's, their game. So I thought I wasn't really knowledgeable about modern poetry at that time. So I bought an anthology of modern poetry and was studying that and came across a poem by Howard Nemeroff that bit me, and I was, that was a big turning point. From that point I started writing poems then, and liked it, and seemed to be fairly successful doing it. And so I had to sort of retool myself. I was hired as a Faulkner scholar, and I had to sort of convince them to, let me go the other way, and it took a while.
Do you remember what Nemeroff poem it was in particular?
Yes, it was a poem called Mouse Meal, and I looked this up. This is the anthology that was in the Old Brennan Reed Modern Poetry Anthology. And here it is, it's kind of dog-eared, and I still have. And it was that one poem, Mouse Meal, and it had that wonderful combination of humor and darkness that I really like. Mm-hmm. My favorite writers, fiction and poetry, all have that tendency to write in a serio-comic vein, which I like to do. Mm-hmm. So it sort of got me on the right track, I think. And I'm, I was, got to know Howard a little bit, and that was a great experience.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's no surprise that you like that kind of fiction too. Do you want to read 2 more poems maybe from the book?
Okay. This one's called Oldguy Superhero Counter-Terrorist. Oldguy's in line for his Social Security check when a man enters carrying a gun and wearing a suicide vest. Though people start to scream, Oldguy continues dog paddling through the shallows of his memory till the terrorist, noticing his scarlet cape and blank expression, shoves the gun in his face and asks how it feels to face certain death. Same as usual, says Oldguy, mistaking the threat for a rare show of interest, which prompts him to dust off his 5 examples of why everything's gone to goddamn hell since Truman fired Custer. After a while, the terrorist's eyelids droop, and he slumps into a nearby chair, snoring. When the gun drops to the floor, Oldguy politely retrieves it, just as the SWAT team bursts in. "How did you do it, Oldguy?" asks the press. "Glue what?" he says.
And then, there was a Oldguy Superhero Counter-Terrorist, and we have this illustration too by Tim Mayer of Oldguy saving the day at the bank. Yeah.
I'm really grateful to Tim. I was, I started putting his poems together and thought, this is kind of coming out like a comic book character, and I wondered if I'd find somebody who could do superhero comics. And one of the students of the MFA program is a graphic novelist, said, "I've got just the guy for you," and we connected, and we went from there.
That's really, I was going to ask about that, how that came to be, because it's such perfect art. I mean, I love the art in this book and the cover, which he also did, of course. How did you find yourself working together? Did you show him poems, like the whole book, and he just illustrated what he felt like, or how did that work?
I sent him a set of poems, and then he sent me some sketches, and we had to go back and forth a little bit because I had an idea of what Oldguy looked like, and he had kind of a different idea of what Oldguy looked like. And then the original sketches that came back, Oldguy looked kind of sort of like a mean fat guy, and I thought, that's not really what I'm thinking of. And so I told him that, and then immediately the next time he came back with the perfect Oldguy figure, and So then I sent him all the Oldguy poems and let him pick out the ones that he felt, that he could illustrate the best. And so that's the way we worked out.
Yeah. I just realized why I love the illustration so much. That looks exactly like my grandfather.
Oh, really?
With the big chin. Yeah, that's totally him. Well, you want to keep going?
Okay. I'll do one more Oldguy poem. The Oldguy superhero discovers his brother. Oldguy, known to some as Old White Guy, discovers that Old Black Guy lives next door. After getting acquainted, they go out for a couple of beers at a local bar, where it dawns on them that though young White Guy got all the breaks, now, as old guys, they're treated as equals, better off dead. In light of this, they celebrate how racial slurs now seem innocuous as Nerf balls. Kneel and lick my boot, opens Old White Guy. Bow and kick my black ass, counters Old Black Guy. Coon, shouts one. Ofe, retorts the other, followed by tearful laughter. After a while, the regulars complain to the bartender that the old guys who ought to be locked up in some home are acting like they own the place. A bouncer escorts them out through an alley door and shoves them into a pile of uncollected trash. After helping each other up, they head for the nearest liquor store. Another fine mess you gotta send to, Brillo Pad, grins one. Me and yo mama's dried up titties, bird shit, chuckles the other. Old guys ambling along as if they owned the whole damn street.
This Oldguy superhero discovers his brother. And there's the illustration for that. Jessica Dawson asks, before we move on from the Oldguy poems, Jessica Dawson, I think this is the Chicago Jessica Dawson, she asks, how did you come up with different scenarios for Oldguy that Oldguy experienced in the book? So did you brainstorm? Did you just write one and then the other? Was there...
I brainstormed. I started thinking, well, what if I put him in this situation? What if I put him in that situation? And one of them I used a friend of mine anecdote, the one where Oldguy gets in a bar and gets out of a fight by pretending he knows karate. I met a friend in McDowell Colony who was a Japanese kid, a very slightly built small guy, and his family who lived in Seattle moved to a little town in Oklahoma, and the bully decided to pick on him, and he was helpless pretty much, but he watched a TV show called Kung Fu, and so he did an imitation of the Kung Fu thing. He didn't know karate at all, but the guy was completely intimidated by him. So I used that, I turned that into one of my Oldguy poems.
Yeah, it reminds me. I wonder if it's a similar experience to writing SNL skits or something. You have characters and throwing them together.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, he pops them into one, and pretty much the same with the Fool poems. I think about what if I put him in this situation? What would he do? And then he winds up telling me what he's going to do.
What do you think is the connection between comedy and poetry? Because I've always felt like comedy and poetry are very closely related. And in the way that the gesture always tells the truth, there's that whole, comedians are the ones that can stand up and say the things that we think but don't want to say, and we are, both are articulating something that we kind of know but didn't know we quite knew, and so we're like, and then there's that expression that poets, if you're an audience, they go which is this kind of like a laughter almost. It's like a tiny little mini laugh.
Well, Howard Nemeroff, whom I mentioned before, has a really fascinating essay in a book called Reflections on Poetry and Poetics, called Bottom's Dream, the relationship between lyric poetry and jokes. And he talks about a similar dynamic, that there has to be, in the joke, there is the setup and the punchline, and in the lyric poem, there is the surprise. You have to surprise, and the surprise has to seem, after you surprise someone, it has to seem inevitable. It has to fit perfectly. And that's the way the joke punchline goes. And I think what he's talking about there relates to what you're talking about, the relationship between poems and comedy. And also, it sort of, to me, explains what makes a perfect metaphor or simile. You got the surprise, and then it got to fit exactly. It can't just be surprise, or it can't just be something that fit and doesn't really surprise. So, I think there's an intimate connection, and that's kind of against the grain of the popular notion that poetry is a high. It's not prosaic. It's lofty, and to write a great poem, you must be totally serious. And humor is a kind of low sort of thing. Not many great awards go to comedy in poetry, but some of the poets. I don't know. Billy Collins has been kind of attacked for being too much funny stuff in there. But I think George, that you were talking to in the last interview. Made a perfect point that somehow comedy can become better with seriousness in it, and seriousness can become better with comedy in it. There's a great blending in it. But there's Aristotle talked about in the Poetics. He talked about comedy and tragedy, and for him, tragedy is for the nobility. Is the tragic fall. You have to come from a high place, and comedy is for the farm people, the clods and everything, and so that attitude kind of lingers, and it's unfortunate, I think, but there is that notion that sort of undermines what we're talking about, how the two are greatly related and strengthen each other.
Yeah, and there's a way, like I don't know, like George Carlin, for example, probably has more influence on the culture than writers in many other genres do. Just with his stand-up, and it's the same kind of insightful things that poets do, just from a different sort of avenue that's half performance or something. But poets perform too, so it's so similar to me, and I don't know. It's hard to distinguish between the two at some point.
Well, Richard Pryor was a wonderful example too. Had these amazing comic narratives that he would spin. He could put them into poetry pretty easily.
It's sort of in the same vein. Diana Cole asks if you've written funny poems that turn serious at the end. That I assume she means like that you're surprised by where it went, that it went somewhere darker than you expected.
It's funny that she should answer that. I have one that turned very dark here that I'll, if I can find it. Okay, where is it? Never winning. Okay. Biggest fool. Okay, I'm still looking for it. Spilling my coffee. Okay. Yes, and the answer is yes. Yeah, I've had poems that I sort of started in a light vein and that turned extremely dark. Here it is. This is called Screaming B-Movie Victims. I bought some wonderful figurines that I always thought, they're kind of funny. They're running away, and the Godzilla is squashing them and stuff. So the poem sort of started out that way, and then took this.
Is that one of the ones you sent? Oh, yeah, it is. Okay, I see.
Yes, yeah. Screaming B-Movie Victims. You can see them on DVD or TMC, stampeded by the blob, Godzilla, the giant Gila monster, by them or the it from outer space or beneath the sea. They sprint down Main Street, glancing over their shoulders, coattails flapping, skirts flying up. A few stumble and sprawl or stand there staring up in terror, shot from the creature's viewpoint as they're about to be pancaked or devoured. It's hard not to laugh at the way they ham it up, ditching inhibitions for the primal shriek, bugging their eyes and waving their arms as their B-grade bit part fates unfold. You can buy a set of them in plastic, thumb-tall figures sold for their comic kitschiness. Something Eichmann thought he saw through the peephole at Auschwitz when the Zyklon pellets dropped and the Jews shrieked and waved their arms, made a human pyramid up to the small air vent. The bodies were laughingly called figuren, meaning puppets or dolls, which is what they looked like when shoved into ovens or dumped in graves long as football fields. In a model made for Landsman's movie Shoah, the dolls file to their shower and crematorium too, unwary as the ants we used to roast by focusing sunlight with a magnifying glass as they soldiered toward their hole. We laughed to watch them scatter for their lives, then writhe and sizzle like haywire wind-up toys. We were Marines at Iwo, burning Japs, who used Chinese as bayonet dummies, and were shown on posters as cartoon bugs or monkeys. In Life magazine, we saw the head of one, hood ornament on a GI tank, toothless, withered in the heat, mouth still gaping in a scream, like some rubber prop from Attack of the Crab Monsters.
Oh, wow.
So we can see where that one turned.
Yeah, that definitely did. That went in a dark, powerful place.
Oh. Yeah, it didn't start out that way, but it
did you have any inkling that you were going there with it, or did it just come out that way?
I didn't. I think I've read a lot about the Holocaust, and I knew that the Nazis, that the gas chamber referred to the victims as dolls or mannequins. And when I was talking about the figures you could buy, the connection kind of dawned on me. I thought, wait a minute, I can't do that. But then I thought, well, maybe I'll do that. And
oh, wow.
So then everything else came rolling out.
yeah, wow. And that's a newer poem. Is it forthcoming in any books? Your next book or something? Or
it's already forthcame. I think it's in Vanishing Point, which is the book before this. Or it may be in Put This On Please with the New and Selected, which came out before Vanishing Point. But it's in one of my books.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I have Vanishing Point. I should have pulled it out too. I thought I had the two most recent. But let me see. There's another question I wanted to ask. Pass along. Jimmy Pappas says, I've noticed many allusions to movies and pop culture in many of your poems. I like to do that as well. It allows the reader to bring in many personal references the author may not even realize. And that's something that I, in my own writing, I don't like using references like that so much. It feels like it dates poems to me. Do you ever think about the why that you do that, or is that something that just comes out too?
Well, I think pop culture, can be is part of our culture, and I like to blend the low and the high. And so I do that, and also they seem to go together to me, and it doesn't bother me much. And the allusions to movies, I'm full of allusions to film classics, and that comes from being a kid in a house where there was no art whatsoever, no music, no books, no nothing except our old black and white color TV, or our black and white TV set with the great 16-inch screen that they used to have, and in the evenings when there was early times, the programming is pretty thin, and after 8 o'clock or so, they filled it out with showing old films, and those were my first exposure to art, and they sort of stuck with me from my childhood on, and always seemed to be useful to bring into poems one way or another.
Yeah, that's really interesting because most of the poets that have been on here have said that I grew up in a book full of houses and my dad would get liquored up and recite Yeats or something. So it's very different to have a.
My dad ran a packing house, so he was not into that very much.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so it makes sense though that it's more of a the cultural references are much less literary in your books. Do you want to read a couple more poems?
Okay. Thought I'd read one that came out in Rattle.
Okay, yeah.
And it's a full poem that is I have now a collection ready, and I'm sending it out, which is a whole new collection of fool poems called "Call Me Fool." And so this is from the new book, or the manuscript. Fool invents the piano, 1250 A.D. Like the monkey that accidentally typed Hamlet, Fool, tinker in his workshop, constructed an exact likeness of a Steinway concert grand, which he called the making sounds with little hammers on wires machine. It looked impressive, but he was puzzled about what to do with it. It was too big and complicated to be a doorstop, and too heavy and lopsided to be a wheelbarrow, especially with those little brass wheels. So he tried using it to scare rats out of the hayloft, but the rats weren't impressed, and he sprained his back winching it up. Fool pushed on the levers to make high sounds and low ones, wondering why he'd made some levers black. Neighbors, hearing eerie noises from his house, suspected Fool of conjuring evil spirits to cast spells on them. Several broke out in goat-shaped rashes. Others began speaking gibberish. Soon, Fool found himself trussed atop his machine, which was then dumped into a lake as Bartók's Piano Concerto No. 1 dawned on him.
And that was Fool Invents the Piano, which is in Rattle. I think that's Rattle, the current issue of Rattle, if I remember right.
I think it is the current. Yeah. I think it is the current. Do
you want to explain, where did the Fool concept come from? And what drew you to that, do you think?
What drew me to that, I think, goes back to my interest in film classics and in silent comedy, and specifically Buster Keaton is my favorite silent comedy star, and he's one of the universal fool figures. That's part of his character, and I started thinking about it. And fool is an archetype, of course. I think the first story or poem that was ever uttered in whatever cave probably had a fool in it, and fools in the Bible and fools throughout literary history. Don Quixote's wonderful fool, Billy Pilgrim, you name it, and their films, stand-up comedy, they're all over the place, and I think it's because we're all related to Fool, and so and I feel especially related to him. So that's where I got connected with him, and I'm back at it again. I thought I had a whole book about him, and I thought, well, that's it, and then suddenly he came back, and I think I'm through with him now, but I never know.
Yeah, well, it's such a great character because I feel like we try to pretend that we don't have the Fool in us so much, but we all have the Fool in us. We all believe foolish things and do foolish things, and then we kind of like hide. We hide them in our minds and pretend it never happened, but it happens all the time. Like we're not evolved to make accurate models and concepts of the world. We believe silly things that aren't true. We have all these cognitive errors that make us see things the wrong way, we're really an awkward species too. Walking on 2 feet, stumbling over everything. Or get the big forehead because we spent a history of running into tree branches.
It's part of the human condition. I think the great serial-comic writers. Humor, comedy is part of the human experience. It's part of their vision of what human existence is all about. And if you leave it out, if you sponge it out, sometimes you get sentimentality. If you're trying to hide tragedy and it's all pure and stuff. As a wonder, I'm always Auden's line, which I'm sure I'm not quoting exactly, from Musée des Beaux-Arts. Even in the moment of dreadful martyrdom, there is always the torturer's horse scratching his innocent behind on a tree. That's he says about suffering, they were never wrong. Okay, suffering is dire and serious and everything, but in real experience, it's not pure. It's mixed up with this other element.
Yeah, I think too. I don't know why, but the book. I don't know if there's any Hitler references, but it reminds me too of the way that Hitler is a fool in a lot of aspects too. He's the height of evil, but he does a lot of goofy, foolish things too.
Mussolini even more.
Oh, yeah.
Mussolini was like a clown, but an evil clown.
Yeah. Well, do you want to read some more? I keep cutting you off, and
Okay.
I keep saying read two, and then you
that's
just
all
read one.
Well, here's another Fool poem. Maybe you remember the old comic book yet, or you've seen the old comic book, the Charles Atlas thing about the guy who kicked sand on the 97-pound weakling.
No, I've never seen that.
Okay, it's a famous comic ad, and it was in the back of my my Oldguy comic book because it's a sort of archetypal comic book ad, and there was a guy named Charles Atlas who had a bodybuilding system that used to be advertised in comic books when I was a kid, and there was this 97-pound weakling who was with his girlfriend at the beach, and this bully comes by and kicks sand on them, and the girl goes off with the bully, and he goes and discovers the Charles Atlas bodybuilding system and builds himself up and comes back and punches the bully out and goes, wins the girl back. So this is my version of that. Especially you don't have the poem in front of you. There are two characters whose names are sort of allegorical and might confuse when I'm just reading. There's a character in the first stanza called Act, A-C-T, Act, and then there's a character in the second stanza called Thought. So Act versus Thought.
Is this in the book or?
This is in Ship of Fool. Okay. Page 74.
Okay. Gotcha.
97-pound fool. Shades cocked on his forehead. Fool spreads his beach towel on the sugar crystal sand, smooths out the wrinkles for his felicity, hoists a beach umbrella. This is the life, he thinks, as he eases onto the tie-dyed terry cloth. Just then, the bully Act struts by, kicking sand on them. Fool's protests earn him 2 black eyes, and Felicity strides off with the assailant. Browsing at the drugstore, Fool finds an ad for the Charles Atlas bodybuilding system on the back of a comic book, and after applying dynamic tension for only 15 minutes a day, swells into an image of the founder. Adonisized, he marches to the beach to win back his beloved, only to find out she's taken up with Thought, a yachtsman whose charm is unassailable, whose marble library is all Greek to Fool. So that's my version of that.
Yeah, that's from Ship of Fool. William, you sell your books really well, at least as far as I know. I know Ship of Fool, I think, because I had my book is with Hen Press too, and I think we were talking once, and they mentioned you were one of the better sellers they have on their whole inventory. And when you did a reading in La Cañada, it was full. What do you do? Like, is there a way that you work with marketing or anything, or do you do a lot of readings, or is it just the kind of poems that you write? How do you market poetry in the 21st century now?
Well, that is the big question. I just do everything I can think of. I try to give a lot of readings, and I've done one time my third book. I blogged 6,000 miles of driving and flying and everything else to do the readings and stuff. I was trying to sort of for a record, and I was at a panel on promoting your own book at AWP, and this guy, I can't remember the guy's name right now, but my punchline, is like 6,000 miles, and everything. The audience was kind of breath went out, and so this guy was after me, and he went 65,000 miles. So I sort of melted at that point.
I got to call the Guinness Book for the next tour.
Yeah, he was in all 48 states, and it went on and on. Anyway, I do Facebook, and I do all this stuff. I don't do Twitter because I'm not really great at tech stuff. But I try to get the book out and keep things rolling. Do
you find people write poems and send them to you? Because the thing that I always find is that there's a weird way in which poetry is like a grand conversation, and that we always, if you like reading poetry, you end up being a poet yourself and writing, and that's kind of the secret to what Rattle does, is that we, help people participate as many ways as we can and include everybody, because we know, because every reader is a writer too, and that's kind of how poetry works. Do you find you get a lot of feedback that way? Do people send you their own work and things like that?
Sometimes send me, somebody will send me, I wrote a fool poem too, or I wrote an Oldguy poem too, and we go back and forth with that. But I'd like to compliment you guys on the way you go back and forth with your audience, and not just bring out a magazine and there you are, and that's it, with all these things that you're doing to get people talking back and forth, and poets communicating with each other, and letting your readers vote on who wins the prize, and a lot of cool stuff you guys are doing.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's just, it's because though that you can't assume that it's like a one directional interchange, because it's really a dialogue that we have with literature. Like, just having words bounce around in your mind makes you want to write poems too, and participate and share your perspective. So yeah. Is there any advice you give to students? Cause you teach in an MFA. What's your number one? What's your elevator advice? If you
my elevator advice is to that tenacity may be a notch over genius in being a poet, because there's so much coming at you that's discouraging, especially when you're starting out. And I know several people who were I think better poets than I was, who just gave up because I sent my first poetry collection out 55 times before it got accepted. And a friend of mine came over for dinner one time, and he said, I wrote a book, and he said, but I sent it out 5 times, and that's it for me. So you have to be abnormally stubborn, and I think what keeps you being stubborn without just having to have it come from some artificial place. You got to love writing poetry. You have to love. That's more fun for me. That's what I love the best about putting a poem together and writing one. That's a bigger charge than I have. Getting published or all that other stuff. If I had, I tell my students that you want to get published. First of all, you're not going to make any money. And second of all, if you're just doing to get published or something other than what you love, then forget it. And so that's my little shop talk.
Yeah, I think that's a good piece of advice there. I always say attrition is half the battle. I kind of think that's how it works with poetry.
It really is.
I've seen it myself. I've been an editor for 15 years, and some of the poets that they're young and then they write a couple amazing poems and you think, oh my God, this is the next big poet. And then you come back later and they have some other career completely unrelated to poetry because they kind of either got bored or just didn't love it enough or whatever happened. But the people who stick with it are the ones that find their audience and do that.
Yeah. Get out there and sell the book.
Yeah, exactly. Well, do you want to read maybe, let's see. Let's read one more, and then I'll take another question from the audience, and then we'll read
Okay.
one.
So I'll read a serious one?
Yeah. We'll have two poems left.
Okay, 2 poems. They'll be short.
Okay.
I was, my last 2 years in high school, I worked in a packing house and developed a morbid curiosity about the killing floor, and especially the hog kill, which was... I don't know whether you're aware of it, but they scream like human beings when they're being slaughtered. It's terrifying. And the hog sticker, the guy who actually sticks the knife in the hog's jugular or carotid artery, actually, the one in this packing house that I worked in was this stone-faced guy. It was very, all this violence around him, and he was just sticking hogs and not changing his expression whatsoever. I guess that's the way he, kept from going nuts.
Yeah, it seems like you'd have to.
So this is called Sticker. Inside that fusty hall of oak and chains and pulsing din, fit for rack and thumbscrew, quickness counted, concentration too, hung by a hind leg, Hogs scream and flail and bite. That knife can cut both ways. The bite heals slow. He kept inside his to and fro, perforate and pull, step back, then up again. His face that Indians on the nickel, squared and still, unastonished by the sudden spill.
That was Sticker, another
Sticker. That's from a chapbook called the Packing House Cantata that came out a while ago.
Let me ask. I got to make a question on something, but Jessica Dawson again says the first few rejections were rough and humbling, but now I kind of appreciate any that come my way. Poems get rejected for a reason. You can only get better, right? And I wonder, is there a poem or book that you that wasn't ready and it was rejected, and then you sort of realized it and kept working on it? Has that been part of your process?
Well, I don't think until I got with Red Hen, who's kind of my publisher now, none of my books got accepted the first time I sent them out. So I thought, well, I must have to do something here. I kept polishing and sending out. So yeah, it can be a helpful signal that you need to just press a little harder, rework things a little more.
Mm-hmm. And then somebody else asked, I'm having trouble finding it. I'm scrolling back up, but somebody asked about just your writing process in general. And you mentioned having fun with the act of writing poems. Do you have like a time you sit down every day? Do you like have a studious like office hours where I'm going to be writing, or do you just where you're in the mood you end up writing, or when you have time? How does that work for you?
Well, it's different since I'm just part-time teaching now, and so I have a lot of time that I can spend writing. When I was teaching full-time, it tended to take up all my energy. I got most of my writing done in the summer at writing colonies and things. And when I was very busy, my poems usually come in these little buzzes, like a little image occurs to me, or something I see, or something somebody says, but I'm in a place where I can't write a poem about it then. So I get a piece of paper and scribble a little note of some kind, 2 or 3 words that'll just trigger that memory. And sometimes I remember I used to carry a checkbook when I would get my deposit slip out and make a poetry deposit on my deposit slip and take it home and put it in a notebook. And a week or 2 later, I'd have a little list of them, and I'd come back, and some of them had died, withered away, and some of them still had a spark in them. And so then I'd have, I'd sit down on a Saturday or something, I had time to write a poem, and I'd write like that. Mm-hmm. So it was pretty sporadic. I didn't do like every day, because I like teaching every day kind of took all my energy. And then I also was editing a literary magazine on top of that. And so, as you know, editing a literary magazine takes a lot of energy too. So, and now I write pretty much every day, write in the morning and edit in the afternoon. I don't necessarily do it every day, but no pressure. So it's kind of nice.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure everybody could relate to not having time and trying to find ways to fit it in. I didn't realize you edited a literary journal, though. What journal was that?
The Laurel Review.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was a co-editor of it, and we took it over from West Virginia Wesleyan University, and it was started in 1960, so it's still going now. And I bailed out when I took early retirement and turned it over to somebody else. But,
so how long ago was that?
1998 is when I left. Took early retirement.
So what was it like then? I assume the submissions were all hard copy and
yeah, they were all hard copy and we used to look forward to getting Albert Goldbar's submission. You've gotten some from me, because they were these amazing. They had a little cardboard backing and they were typed flawlessly on an old typewriter. No evidence of erasures or anything, and then neatly bound with the string, up and down. And then sometimes we get things from prisons that are written on the outside of the envelope with threats and stuff like that. And we had a chapbook series, GreenTower chapbooks, and a poet named Art Homer. We did a book called Tattoos with a tattoo, the kind of stylized naked lady on it. We got a lot of prison letters from that because they thought it was some kind of stuff inside. And we actually had a running order for 5 years from a sex store in Helsinki, Finland, who was ordering copies of this because they probably thought it was the art of home tattooing or something. And but so we have got them in all sorts of shapes.
Yeah, that's funny. I guess nothing has changed because we still get stuff like that. We still get the Albert Goldbarth, perfectly typed, and we get the prison letters. There's one guy who sends us a letter once a week and they're not really poems, so it's hard to. I don't want to discourage him, and so I try to suggest a way that he could make them more into poems. They're more like rants in a block of text. So you definitely get strange things. And some people, one person sent me a picture of himself naked, like a playing card kind of thing. It was strange. I have this whole drawer back at the office of weird stuff that we've gotten over the years, and it still happens. It's just much less frequent nowadays.
I have an editor friend, Neil Bowers, who edited, the Iowa State literary magazine, Poet and Critic, it was called. And he used to keep, when the editor died and willed him the editorship, he made him swear that he would, like the old editor, would reply to every submission. And so Neil, being an honest, sturdy guy, kept his promise and was replying to every submission. And I said, well, people must really, like that, be very helpful to, if you not just get a blank rejection slip. And he said, well, I get a lot of hate mail too for that. And he took me out, my favorite one, he took me out and he had a whole drawer full of the weird ones. And my favorite one was, you fuck, don't you know I'm in the Penguin?
Yeah, that's a regular. I found out now that it's all email, you cut down that a lot by not sending any rejection letters at night because people are much more likely to be sober in the morning. So if you get a rejection from me, it's just so I don't have to put up with as many death threats as I do if I send one at midnight because someone's drunk and doesn't like the way it went.
Oh, boy, yeah.
Well, anyway.
The life of an editor.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you want to close out with one last poem?
Okay, I'll do one last poem. This one is based on what one of my freshman English students would say was true fact, as opposed to a false fact. This is called Obedience. This was a little. You ever have a dog follow you home when you were a kid?
No, actually.
A stray dog. Well, this was happened to me. Obedience, this is called. The ghost of it whimpered back last night from a wet November 50 years ago. A scraggly cocker that shadowed me home from school and, when I let it in, ignored a meal, to snuffle crotches and hump legs, as if to win us with what it knew of love. Its sad pink dick unsheathed like a gut protruding from a wound, its roomy eyes spinning with dread, its odor of mushroom and shit making itself at home on our carpet. No, bad dog, down, we said, shoving it away till my father got it in the car, and we drove off through the dark to a cornfield outside town where the rain blew and it slumped off right away, going to get lost like a good dog.
That was Obedience. Thanks so much,
yes.
William Trowbridge. It's a pleasure to talk to you as I thought it would be. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
It's been great talking to you, Tim.
Yeah. Have a good night, and I hope to see you again soon. I'm sure I'll see your poem soon. So thanks a lot for continuing to send them.
Okay, take care.
You. Bye.
Bye.
Yes, that was William Trowbridge with his book, his most recent book. Well, I don't know how many books back this is. This just happened to already be on my bookshelf. This is Ship a Fool, which he read from. And he has a new Fool book coming out soon. This is Hen Press. You can get that at redhen.org. And his newest book, though, is Oldguy Superhero. And it's a great book. Let me just show you a few more to get an idea of how fun this stuff is. Like here's Oldguy playing chess with death. You can imagine this is Oldguy versus his nemesis. So there's really fun, entertaining poems with really cool illustrations. If you're trying to introduce poetry to somebody, maybe this is maybe a good example of a gift book that you could share to let people know that poetry isn't the old ivory tower stuff that most people think it is. So check out Oldguy Superhero, and his website is is William Trowbridge. Is it .net? Yep, williamtrowbridge.net. So check out his website. And that was William Trowbridge. Now we're moving on to the open mic portion of the show. Now, just to remind you, if you came in a little late, the open mics now are only about the prompt poems. And because we're trying to encourage people, including myself, maybe especially myself, if we're going to be honest, and especially Megan, we're trying to encourage each other to write poems every week, at least one. I'm going to start writing a news poem every week too. So I'm going to try to write a news poem and a prompt poem. But so the open mic is just for prompt poems. If you would like to, let me put up this on the screen. If you sent in a poem or haven't yet but would like to, just email your prompt poem to openmic@rattle.com, and you can send me a chat message over Skype if you'd like to read it. Michelle Perks and Matthew King are both here. Not Michelle Perks, Michelle Parks. And I think we published Michelle Parks, maybe. Or am I thinking of someone else? Anyway, so two people on Skype are lined up. And the phone number is 818-850-7727. If you'd like to call in and share your poem, The Swimmer, it has to be called The Swimmer. That's the rule. If you'd like to do that tonight, just give me a call at 818-850-7727. Let it ring a few times so it pulls up on my call list, and then I will call you back right away. Let's see. And I'm not sure. So let's see. So Michelle Parks, I think some people don't know that it's only for prompt poems, and it's not just a total pure open mic anymore. But that's the way it is. So Michelle, if you email the poem to openmic@rattle.com so I can see that it's appropriate for today's open mic. It has to be called The Swimmer. I know Matthew King's is called The Swimmer. We'll try him out. Now, okay, so once again, this was the prompt for this week. Must be titled The Swimmer. Must not use the words water or pool. And this is my poem. I'm going to try to write short. I love the short form style of Kay Ryan or Wendy Vidalock or Mike White. I've never really written in that style all that much, so I'm going to use these open mics maybe to work on that style. This is my attempt at trying to cram as much in, because when you have a short poem, you can cram as much in as possible. I really like that, but I'm not really that good at it. So let's see. Let's see how this goes. This is my poem for tonight, The Swimmer. And also, if I do a short poem, it'll give everybody else more time. This is The Swimmer, and this is. My daughter, both Megan and I wrote about the same thing, which is my daughter who loves swimming, but there are no pools where we are. So we only get to go swimming down, either there's a pond in town, actually a sag pond. It's the San Andreas Fault, literally blocking up some water as a pond. The only other place we can go swimming is her grandparents' house down near Palm Springs. And so we like to go down there as much as possible. But we're not able to, who knows when we'll be able to go there again. But here's my poem. This is The Swimmer. The Swimmer. Without the pool or water, there would still be flight. Our holy daughter holding on to the concrete lip, inflated wings that kite above the diving board, the joyous slips she's falling toward. I don't know. So that's my poem. Now Megan's poem, she wrote about the same thing. Our daughter Jo, who just left swimming, and this was Megan's poem, The Swimmer. In the unfiltered Palm Springs sunshine, she is silver as a dolphin, my daughter, and suddenly surreal, half animal, half dream. Light as an August breeze, her hair floats beneath the surface, and when she emerges, her chemical grin reels in the chlorine tide. And suddenly there it is, her grown-up face, its more angular lines, the mischief in her eyes deepening into fierceness, And behind it, I can make out her toddler face, her baby face, all the versions and incarnations of this one life as she turns and glints and darkens and reflects. And then a lone cloud obscures the sun, and she is back to being 9. And when she dives again, the splash she makes almost drowns me. So that was Megan's poem, The Swimmer. So Jo has 2 poems now about her swimming. I wonder if she'll like them. She'll probably be embarrassed. Okay, so let's see who... Matthew King said he would like to try Skype. We've had him on before. Let's see. So let's try Matthew King. Hey, Matthew, let me pull you in 1 second. And if you can, click on the camera button so we can see you too. If you don't want us to see you. Well, I can still hear you. Okay. There you are. Good to see you. Hang on 1 second. Boop. There you are. Oh, hang on. I got things blocked out. Okay. Matthew King. So you're finally. It's nice to see you. You've had a open mic poems for the first, for a couple of weeks in a row now. You're the guy with the birds and bees and blooms.com, the nature photography website, which
that's right.
And calling from Toronto. So your poem is The Swimmer, obviously. Are you ready to read it?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So oddly enough, it's titled The Swimmer. You used to see her float clear across the lake almost every morning, bobbing morning red behind her in the waves, jerking with each stroke, so you couldn't miss her. Cody wasn't the first to think that he could throw a scare or something in her, driving fast right at her like she wasn't there. She'd learned to hold her line. Didn't even bug her anymore, I think. The kids would keep on trying, keep on getting closer. What they ever thought would happen, I don't know. They wanted some reaction. Cody got, I guess, what he was looking for. You'd have to go and ask her why she gave up swimming. Tell her I miss seeing her float across the lake.
Awesome. That was The Swimmer by Matthew King. Thanks so much for sharing that, Matthew, and really great to see you. Yeah, thanks for figuring this out for me.
You too.
I know I appreciate you sending the audio before, but it's much nicer. I like doing callers, so I don't want to give anybody excuses not to.
Yeah, it's my first time doing this.
Well, it worked perfectly. Yeah, so you can go back and watch yourself and feel as awkward as I do every Wednesday when I check out how I looked. Okay. Well, have a good one, Matthew. Good to see you.
All right, you too. Bye. Thanks.
Okay, let's call up Michelle Parks. She texted me. I can actually probably in the chat. Michelle sent me the text of the poem. So I can just paste it in myself to a document here and probably show it to you. Let's see. And then we'll give Michelle a call. You can put it in our font too. Okay. Let me give Michelle a call. Oops, hang on a second. I want to do it with video. Okay. So the Skype thing is waiting to connect. And I should say that if I call you on Skype, make sure to X out of your YouTube when you hear the ring, because there's a delay. There's a 30-second or minute delay. Michelle, can you hear me? Hey, great to... Yeah, oh, there you are. Oh, Michelle Parks. That's where I recognize your name now that I see your face again. Good to see you again. Let me pull you in to the screen. Michelle, hi. So how you doing today? And you're calling from, is it South Carolina?
Yeah, near Charleston.
Yeah, it's a long time no see. You used to do the open mic a lot, a while ago.
Yeah, I just have health issues, but c'est la vie, life is beautiful.
It definitely is. So how you doing now? Are you staying safe with the old coronavirus and all that?
Yeah, I even became ordained.
Oh, really?
I can marry people now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm already married, but if not. So you wrote a swimmer poem for the prompt. Let me try to get it for everybody to see. Let's see. So I think here we go. I think it's a little... Okay. Yeah, so everybody can read along. And go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay, I'll probably change some words as I read it.
Okay.
The swimmer. I never learned to swim. I sat and watched. I ate sandwiches on sand, carefully applying mayonnaise so the foil wouldn't touch the bread. Mother taught me bacteria can kill, and all that I am will die. And I have repented. I had sins washed away, in the bath, scrubbing, intrepid, shamed, for being born in a skin of decay, washed into the drain. I never learned to swim, so I drowned, over and over again, washed away.
Excellent poem. Thanks so much for sharing that, Michelle.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, good to see you. Good to see you again. Thanks for calling. I'm glad you're feeling up to watching the show and joining in.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it.
Yeah, have a good one. Stay safe.
Thanks.
Good night. Okay, let's see. So, let's see, Caitlin B. We got a 401 number. Let me call that 401 number. It is ringing. Hey, this is Tim with Rattle. Did you want to share a poem? Okay, yeah, turn that off. So, yeah, exactly, yeah. And I'll bring it in. Okay. Okay.
Great show tonight.
Thanks. Who is this I'm talking to?
This is Diana Cole.
Hi, Diana. And you sent a poem. I saw you... Did you send
I sent a poem in an email, right. You wrote me back, said you would call, so but I thought I better call in anyway.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I found it. The swimmer here. Okay, let me put it on screen for everybody to see. So where are you calling from?
From Rhode Island.
And how are things in Rhode Island?
They're pretty good, actually. We've got things under control, and we're a small state, so we don't have a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And, but I'm doing what I usually do, which is write and do art, so it's not too different for me.
Yeah. Well, okay, so I have it ready.
Okay.
If you want to read. Yep, go ahead.
Okay. The swimmer. At the gun, they're off. Millions all over the globe, every day, every hour. I imagine them undulating side by side with wobbling butterfly strokes at an impressive 8 inches an hour. What are the odds any will survive? 1 in 200 million? Just one, the lucky SOB, who clocks in at 30 minutes, who carries the heartbeat, the push, to redouble his DNA over and over and over. You were the one who won the rights to my flesh and blood. All knew we were mother and son, the same big ears, wide grin, but you never wore fins or a bathing cap. It was techno and wild hair colors, while I dabbed in a few highlights. My bathing cap, a pale pink, left marks of constriction on my forehead. Fins pushed me ahead of myself. You took an extra lap at college classes, drifted into a riptide, tossed up, slammed down in mosh pits, surrounded by clouds and vapors, surfed the raves in black vinyl Speedos. Still, whatever made it up that canal into that egg first stayed with you, although I can't quite name it. And all the selves that touched bottom resurfaced, unharmed and strong.
Thank you. That was Diana Cole reading The Swimmer. Thanks so much, Diana.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun. It's cool to see all the different takes that people have on the prompt. This is kind of what I'd hoped for when we set up a prompt. It reminds me of doing the ekphrastic challenge where, they with the one picture and then you have like 400 different interpretations of it. This is really cool. I'm glad you could call in and share that. Thanks so much.
Okay, thanks.
Have a good night.
You too.
Okay, so I think, let's see. I'm not going to be able to get to everybody. But Kevin Lemaster. Yeah, Kevin Lemaster has the Swimmer poem. So I'll focus on people who I'll just do a few. We'll do a few. We can't do everybody. As fun as it would be, but there is a time limit. But Vicky Miko, I saw her on the chat, and she has a haiku, if I can find it. Yeah, here it is. This is a good haiku. And yeah, I'm going to have to do it. I don't want to give away people's email addresses and stuff. So let me copy and paste and put this over on that Word doc I had. Okay. So this is Vicky Miko's poem, Haiku, The Swimmer. Prone on the wet grass, at the 5-mile finish line, the swimmer. So here's again. Prone on the wet grass, at the 5-mile finish line, the swimmer. That's an excellent poem, excellent haiku. I love that. Yeah, the 5-mile finish line. I would be prone on the wet grass too. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Let's see. So someone's calling. Let me just answer. Hey, this is Tim with Rattle. Who am I talking to? Oh, hey, Chris. Yeah, I was going to call you next. But thanks for finding me. Let me pull you... Let me pull you in to the stream server in here. And shut off... I can hear myself in the background, so shut that off. Okay. Well, thanks so much. Yeah, I love Bill. So it was really fun talking to him, and he's just how I would expect him to be after reading his books for so many years.
Well, I'd never even known him before, so definitely will be checking him out.
Yeah, well, you're in for a treat. They're all really fun, good books. So yeah, so this is I think I didn't have her in yet, but this is Chris Beaver from somewhere in, is it Oregon or Washington?
Across the Lake Washington from Seattle.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I love that area. Yeah, and Chris has had a poem in Rattle back, Poetry Spawn, maybe a year ago. But she has a...
in the summer.
In the summer, yeah. And here's the swimmer's poem. Oh, there it is. You even include your bio, which is nice. You live in the Pacific Northwest near Seattle. After retiring from teaching, she returned writing poetry in 2017. And so on. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Okay, so here's your poem is up on screen. And
all right.
Oh, hang on. Now it's up on screen. So read it whenever you're ready.
Thanks. The Swimmers. After a humid night of pinochle and a bottle of 2-buck chuck, Olive and Myrtle slipped out the back door and into the lake, naked, the same way they'd been celebrating retirement for 10 summers. Their husbands on the cabin porch, smoking cigars, watched the women's white behinds disappear into the slick chiaroscuro, then grabbed their wives' terry cloth bathrobes and beach towels and drove the mile around to the other side to wait for the women who'd waded through miscarriages and flang-lipped babies, perpetual PTA committees, Olive's double mastectomy, swum past one husband's startup and bankruptcy, the other's fling with a sultry secretary, to emerge, still married, dripping with dignity, steady as the moon marveling over everyone who dares to make their own way across.
Thanks so much. That was Chris Beaver with her poem, The Swimmer. Thanks for sharing that, Chris. Another excellent poem. I'm so glad you could call in, and you did a great job reading it. You mentioned you were nervous, but there's no reason to be. You were a great poetry reader.
Well, the poem is about this woman I used to be in a writing group with in the 1980s who was elderly, and she used to do this with a friend, and they'd swim across Lake Washington at night, and their husbands would drive around and pick them up and bring them back home.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Yeah. People... they have a lot of guts, I think. Does that connect to the ocean, Lake Washington?
Well, yes, if you go through the canals now, yeah, you can. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So be well, and thank you for doing this, Tim. This is really a great way to connect with everyone. It's super.
It's my pleasure. It's just a lot of fun. I love every Tuesday night. I love every Sunday morning. I love every Friday afternoon. These are all the videos we do are really fun. So I'm really glad a lot of people are participating and enjoying it. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, so that is the show for today. Like I said, we had about a dozen people doing the poem this week, so we can't get to everybody. I'm really curious, what everybody else wrote. But thanks so much for doing it. And, the whole point is that poetry is really a good exercise to do for your mind and your spirit and your body. And I'm glad that so many people are participating. So thanks so much. And we'll do it again next week with a prompt. Now, next week's prompt. Oh, yeah, that's right. So Megan gives me these list of prompts like once every couple months. And I couldn't help but pick this one given the book we went over today. This was from her list that she gave me a couple weeks ago. Her poem now is, next week's prompt, I should say, is a superhero comes home to an empty house after a long day on the job. So be inspired by William Trowbridge's Oldguy superhero and make a superhero of your own. I don't know if she knew this book was coming up when she picked this prompt, or if she just was thinking about prompts and came up with this one, but it's perfect for today. So, William Trowbridge has his Oldguy superhero. Come up with your own superhero. And a superhero comes home to an empty house after a long day on the job. That's your prompt for next week. So enjoy writing that. And as always, just send the text if you want to openmic@rattle.com and then call in during the show. And you can read it. And if we don't have enough people calling in, I'll just read poems myself. And we'll go for, 20 minutes or so, sharing maybe 4 or 5 of the poems every week. And it'll be a lot of fun. And more people will be encouraged to write more poems. And that's what this is all about that we do at Rattle. So thanks so much for joining us at that. Now, I should say, let's see, we have the Critique of the Week every Friday, as always, at 2 p.m. Pacific time, which would be 5 p.m. Eastern. Then we have the Open Mic Show, Poets Respond Live, Sunday mornings at noon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific, and that's for your current events poems. It's an open mic. I share the poem or two that we published that week, and then you call in like you do here and share other poems so we can talk about news through poetry. That's always a lot of fun. And finally, and this is going to be the it. I can only do 3 hours of live video a week, as fun as it is, but this is the most amount I could spend on it. But 3 hours is really fun. And next week's guest will be Danusia Lemaris. She's the author of Bonfire Opera, which just came out recently, and she's been published in Rattle several times, dating back to like maybe 2008 or so. So I'm really looking forward to reading her book. She's an excellent poet, and she'll be our guest next Tuesday, May 5th at 9 p.m. And in the meantime, hope you have a great week. Hope to see you soon, and do write that superhero poem prompt. All right, talk to you later. Good night.